Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Pass Ball Show brought to you by JohnPielli.com. Happy to be with you on the 22nd day of December, Friday. The last show that we're going to do until after Christmas. So before we get into the things we're going to talk about today, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, a Happy Holidays. God bless you and your family. I'm going to talk about a couple different things today. We're going to talk about baseball, sports, and unifying America like we always do. We're going to do Pielli's picks, which I got a series. I think we're going to do about 5 or 6 games this week. We'll try to improve on a 16-15 record. But I wanted to open up the show by talking about one of the guys that I looked up to in the world of broadcasting, and that, of course, is Dick Enberg. And Dick Enberg passes away at the age of 82. And one of the things, I've listened to a lot of commentary on Dick Enberg, and I think if you feel that he's had an impact on the world of sports broadcasting, you're going to find probably things that you didn't even know about the depths of what he did. I mean, a guy that not only covered baseball and football, but did college basketball, college football, did tennis. But you realize this is a guy that spent a good amount of his career covering the world of sports. And when you think of the likes of Al Michaels and Bob Costas, who are probably the contemporary broadcasters that I probably look up to the most, you realize that Dick Enberg probably did more than really anybody that you could think about. And the guy that I look up to the most, of course, is no longer with us as well, and that's Howard Cosell, because of what he did in regards to groundbreaking sports broadcasting that really didn't exist until the days of the 1950s when he essentially started it. Now, people had done it before. There was radio and live broadcast of baseball games going back to the late 1930s. But the part that took talent, and listen, broadcasting, talking about what you see, play-by-play and analyst work, yes, that takes talent too. But taking it to another step and bringing in the athletes and entertainers when it comes to broadcasting and talk, radio, and TV that didn't involve sports, it took somebody that was able to take it to the next level and bring the personalities and the people involved in the world of entertainment. And Howard Cosell did that. But when it comes to pure broadcasters, the ability to totally talk about and bring to the viewer and the listener the action that's going on, and talk about whether it's the Olympics, whether it's the National Football League and playoffs and football and Super Bowls and, basketball and baseball. And then to be able to cover a sport like tennis, Dick Enberg had the voice to be able to cover anything. You could cover a couple snails that were trailing their ways through a little bit of pavement, and Dick Enberg was going to be able to give you play-by-play as far as what was going on, and do it in his monotone voice that just kind of sticks in your ears. And there are very few broadcasters that had the ability to do that. And Dick Enberg covered the San Diego Padres for, I guess it was a period of about 7 years, from 2009 to 2016. And he retired at the end of 2016, maybe knowing that it was probably his time to go. And I don't know if he knew that he would only have a little more than a year left on this planet. But this was a guy that you could tell just loved it. Going back from the days of the 60s and 70s when he first started broadcasting, he would literally broadcast anything. But not only do that, but do it with a heartfelt passion and being able to tell a story in a picture to his audience, regardless of what it is that he was covering. And there's certainly broadcasters that specialize in certain sports. Now, Vin Scully, I know, did other sports, but is always going to be remembered for what he did for the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers and his impact as a baseball broadcaster. And Vin Scully could cover other sports. You could look at a lot of other broadcasters that did great things. Keith Jackson. As much as he covered Monday Night Football and did the baseball playoffs in the 70s and the early 80s and the World Series, he's always going to be remembered for what he did in regards to college football. Dick Enberg is one of the very few broadcasters that you can't mention him as just a baseball broadcaster or just a football broadcaster, or for all those that follow tennis and all the major championships as just a tennis broadcaster. He was the ability that literally can tell a story, even if a story didn't exist. He could cover anything. And I think it's a shame, because I think part of him retiring when he decided he wasn't going to do San Diego Padres baseball anymore, what may have been a sign that it was time to go, and he may not have had enough time left on this planet. He may have knew that his time was coming. And I don't know that. I don't know anybody in regards to the Enberg family or anybody that's close enough to him. Though we are going to reach out next week. We're going to try to get Mark Grant on the program. Mark Grant, of course, former Major League pitcher, did Padres games with Dick Enberg for years. And we will try to reach out to Mark Grant. We'll see if we can get him on a program next week. But for those that were close to him, I wonder if they knew, if Dick Enberg knew that his time was coming to the end. I mean, he lived 82 glorious years. And like I said, the thing that stands out the most about him, and there's two things. The number one part that I'm going to get into, obviously, is what I've already talked about. His impact on a number of different sports, not just anyone that you can name. You can name baseball, you can name football, you can name college basketball, tennis, the Olympics. He did all of them and made an impact on each one of those sports that he covered. And it was a different day and age in a broadcaster. You look at sports broadcasting now, and there are people that specialize in specific sports, and you may not be able to see their versatility. In the 70s and the 80s, in order to be a successful broadcaster, you had to do multiple sports. And if you were successful at one, the networks, whether it was CBS or NBC or ABC, they were going to put you on different sports. So if you were only kind of one-dimensional, it showed. And you weren't able to cover essentially multiple sports all year round. And that's when you saw the best in broadcasters. And there's no question about it. Dick Enberg stood out in just about everything that he covered. And I think of Dick Enberg and obviously the many different impacts that he had over the course of the different sports that he covered. But I also remember his little bit that he did, his cameo in Naked Gun. I'm Curt Gowdy, along with Jim Palmer, Tim McCarver, Dick Vitale, Dick Enberg, Mel Allen, and Dr. Joyce Brothers. And which, by the way, still is one of the greatest underrated movies and movie series in the history of film. But I remember, obviously, I think it was the highlights that they were doing where they're throwing these, fictitious highlights in there, and the guy goes up to catch a ball, and he ends up missing the ball, and his head falls off. And Mel Allen saying, "How about that?" And the look on Dick Enberg's face. And I'm always going to remember that. But also, most importantly, his impact on the world of broadcasting. And as a broadcaster myself, a radio show host, he's certainly one of those that I've looked up to. And I've always said Howard Cosell because of him being kind of revolutionary in what he did in the 50s and 60s, doing things that few others had ever even tried. But Dick Enberg's greatness and his versatility and his ability to cover so many different sports and doing it in the same way with the same type of passion. You never would have thought And I'm sure asking him, he could tell you what sports he enjoyed covering the most. But you would never have known that by watching his broadcast, because he had the same passion. And it wasn't, listen, he wasn't over the top. You know, you weren't hearing him yelling and screaming. He did show emotion, but most of it was in his monotone voice that he was blessed with. And few people out there were blessed with a voice that was just so soothing and natural. And when you heard a voice, you just knew that that was a person that was meant to be a sports broadcaster. From the Olympics to tennis to college basketball to football. And obviously the years upon years that he was a baseball broadcaster, both on a national level and then on a local level in San Diego for the last 7 years. I'm going to miss his voice. I'm going to miss knowing that I could turn on a live game and hear his voice. And I want to tonight see if I could find some classic games just to hear him give the play-by-play, because he was great at it. He was an inspiration for a couple different generations of people that came up through the ranks in the world of broadcasting. And he's going to be missed. And the last point I'm going to make, when he retired in 2016 after his run with the San Diego Padres for 7 years, a lot of attention was put on Vin Scully, because Vin Scully had announced before the season that was going to be his last year. Dick Enberg showed his humbleness all along, which we knew that it wasn't about him. The fact that he was willing to wait essentially to his last week and make it about just his last game as opposed to last season showed you all you needed to know about Dick Enberg. May he rest in peace at the age of 82. Moving on, the New York Mets announced that Omar Minaya is going to be once again joining their front office. The former general manager ran the Mets from the years of 2005 to 2010 when he was let go and replaced by Sandy Alderson. Now he gets a chance to work with Sandy Alderson. I hear a lot of Mets fans, and I understand the angst, the frustration, and everything that's going on with the organization. And it's taking on a lot of the New York radio airwaves over the last week or so, because it's starting to come to a head that once again the Mets are in a situation where they're allowing finances, or lack thereof, to impact what their team is going to look like coming into 2018. And I understand there's a lot of time left to go. And maybe the approach would work. It could. So for all of those Mets fans that are negative right now, thinking that the world is collapsing and falling apart and there's a big fire, a point that I made on the show a couple days ago about the Major League Baseball off season not picking up the way that it should could very well help the Mets as they look to put together their roster for 2018. Right now, it seems like the Mets are finished. You're talking about $10 million left to spend. I think they should add another reliever. They need to add at least one more impact bat into their starting lineup. What you're hearing and seeing right now doesn't seem like the Mets are going to be able to do that. Maybe they should add another starter. Maybe they should add a player or two that's versatile to be able to help them off their bench. Right now, it doesn't seem possible, but going back to the point I made earlier in the week on the Pass Ball Show, teams are not as ambitious to want to spend the big money on offensive players and starting pitchers because they've been able to, and proof has been shown over the last couple of years, that they've been able to supplement those numbers that you're looking for with those elite players, position players and starting pitchers, with lesser caliber players that are more cost efficient, and having deeper bullpens because starters are not going any more than 6 innings now. So as teams are looking to put their best team together, they're not as interested in bringing in those top players, which doesn't bode well right now for Eric Hosmer and J.D. Martinez and Mike Moustakas and Lorenzo Cain. And starting pitchers like Yu Darvish and Jake Arrieta, and to a lesser extent Lance Lynn and Alex Cobb. The relief pitchers are getting paid. Greg Holland's going to end up with a nice deal. I think it's going to bode very well for Wade Davis and Addison Reed as well. But for those other players, I don't see that team going out there giving a 6-year, $180 million contract to J.D. Martinez and Eric Hosmer. It still may happen. And remember, in free agency, it only takes one. It only takes one player, one team, to be able to value a player like that. And if the team does, that player is going to get paid, and that's all they need. But I'm telling you, for those Mets fans that are ready to jump off the bridge, let this offseason play out first. If it's the end of February and this roster that you see right now is exactly what the Mets are going to start the season with, or looks like they are, then jump off the bridge. I wouldn't jump off the bridge yet, because I think the Mets' philosophy in regards to being willing to wait could give them some options as we get into the latter part of January and the early part of February. And maybe I'll pull the tape up of this show if they're able to address needs and make the Mets fan a little more excited about the 2018 season. Because I feel there's enough time. The message that's being sent now is that the Mets are not willing to commit a ton to payroll. But let me tell you, outside of the Yankees, and it looks like maybe the Giants, and probably the Dodgers, and possibly the Cubs, what other team is committing huge money to impact players right now? A lot of money is going out to relievers. And by the way, the Mets jumped into that market when they gave Anthony Swarzak a 2-year, $14 million contract. Every team's jumping in on relievers. But what teams are going out there spending the big money on big position players? That market hasn't started yet. And the more time that goes by, the more of a chance that some players, like a Jay Bruce, like maybe even a Mike Moustakas, may have to settle for lesser deals than their agents were telling them they could get when free agency started. So let me talk about Omar Minaya for a second. This is the same Omar Minaya that has been given a lot of credit, almost posthumously. And I'm not saying he's dead, but I'm talking about his tenure as general manager ending when the Mets fired him after the 2010 season. He's been getting a lot of credit for what he built in regards to scouting and player development with the New York Mets. How many players, particularly pitchers, came up and succeeded that had a backdrop of, by the way, Omar Minaya signed or drafted that player? I don't care if this was a Fred Wilpon decision. I don't care who in the Mets front office wanted Omar Minaya back or who didn't want Omar Minaya back. The bottom line, this guy's biggest strength is scouting and player development. And having him in there as an assistant general manager, or even him consulting with Sandy Alderson and John Ricco and J.P. Ricciardi, can only help the Mets. So anybody that's bashing the Mets for bringing this guy back, I'll tell you, number one, I don't care what the reason was. I don't care if it was Fred Wilpon. And I don't care how much you dislike Fred Wilpon. or Jeff Wilpon or anybody in the Mets organization for that matter. Omar Minaya can only help the Mets by scouting, helping with player development, and potentially allowing the Mets to maybe strengthen their farm system. As a Mets fan, I'm excited that Omar Minaya is going to have something to do with their upcoming draft. The Mets are not involved in the Caribbean. They're not involved in the Pacific Rim. They're scouting in Latin America countries. Outside of Ahmed Rosario, has not been very strong either. I know there's a couple players they got coming up. You know, Luis Gil-Rome, Andres Jimenez. But it's not like they're dominating, bringing in players from these other countries. Omar Minaya has a strength in that. So why would you not think that that was a positive? Omar Minaya's tenure as the Mets general manager may not be remembered for bringing them the World Series championship. But I'll tell you, I'm glad that he is going to have some say in regards to some of the younger players that are going to come through the Mets system in the near future. And it comes, in all honesty, with perfect timing. Because the players that have come through the Mets system that Minaya either signed or drafted have already come through. It's time to get his voice on some other players that could be part of the New York Mets' future. So, to me, there is no way that I'm looking at this as a negative. In regards to the rest of the Mets offseason, I can't tell you what they're going to do. I have as little idea as anybody that's listening to this program right now does. Mark Carrig has done a pretty good job. He put that article together where he went after the Mets ownership and questioned their desire. Is it because 2017 didn't work out when Fred Wilpon and Jeff Wilpon invested more money in payroll than they ever had in the history of the franchise? Are they looking back at the results saying we're not going to do that again? Maybe. But I've said, number one, that there's no reason to say that they can't put out a competitive team in spite of that. And number two, I'm not going to try to be the one that's trying to throw some reason in there. I'm just speaking it as I feel it. There's plenty of time left in this offseason, and there's very little activity in regards to players that are moving. I wouldn't rule them out on Jay Bruce. To me, it's going to have a lot to do with what other teams are out there looking at Jay Bruce. Is there a team that believes that he is a 4-year, $80, $90 million player? I'm sure there is. But what does that individual team feel? Do they have to make that move? Do they have other options? And I've said all along, when we're looking at, J.D. Martinez in 6 years and $180 million, are there other alternatives? The Red Sox signed Mitch Moreland. They got Mitch Moreland and Hanley Ramirez and Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley, and Andrew Benintendi. So if they're going to sign J.D. Martinez, where are you going to play him? Are you going to platoon Hanley and Moreland? Maybe they can, but it's not as much of a need as you could say for a team that absolutely needed to add the power bat and put them in a certain part of their lineup. I think the Giants are going to be interesting. They brought in Evan Longoria. They're going to make an effort to compete this year. They're not rebuilding. They're going to add an outfielder. J.D. Martinez will be a good fit there, but I don't think they're looking to go above the luxury tax threshold. And if they're not, they're going to be a little more budget conscious. I don't think they can sign J.D. Martinez and not go over the luxury tax threshold. Does that put them in a market for Jay Bruce? Well, if it does, they may have to shed some more salary if they're looking to bring Bruce in at a competitive rate on their payroll for 2018. I think there's options, but the problem is there's so much quantity in regards to position players. And the fact that the Mets haven't gone out there and signed a Logan Morrison or a Lucas Duda, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think you could sign a player like that at the end of January. So what's wrong with letting things play out a little more and seeing if perhaps a Jay Bruce could come down to a point where you could get him with a 3-year deal? Because Jay Bruce with a 3-year contract would be a very good signing for any team that signed him. I think there's a lot more off-season to go, and this time has gone by, and so little has happened. And I'll tell you, in my 4 years of being at the baseball winter meetings, it was great getting a chance to chat with a lot of different people. But I tell you, part of the reason I'm down there is to just be entrenched and consumed when the moves are starting to happen. It wasn't like that this year. But you know what that means? It means there's a lot of players, there's a lot of free agents that are looking for homes, and there's a lot of incomplete rosters when we're breaking down each individual team. There's a lot more to happen, and there's going to be a lot more that's going to happen after Christmas and into January. And I don't know how active the New York Mets are going to be in regards to being at the forefront of it. I'm sure they're talking to players. I'm sure they're talking to organizations about trades. You know, they were interested in trading for Ian Kinsler. Somebody like an Adrian Gonzalez, they could probably wait even longer on. Target a couple players at a certain price that you're willing to pay. It's becoming a buyer's market. And I understand Mets fans are frustrated. They've been for years. And if you're feeling in your heart and your soul that this is just another example of the Mets, I feel you. I get where you're coming from. And I know you've heard for years upon years, going back probably to the early 1960s. Have a little patience. But there's reasons to have a little more patience this offseason as opposed to others. And I know the negativity's out there. I know the negativity is not going to make you excited as far as what you could look forward to seeing. But this offseason, as opposed to others, have a little patience, because very little outside of the relief pitchers market has developed at all. And these hundreds of free agents that are out there now, at some point, are going to need to find a home. And I know the Mets fan says, hey, it's a home for 29 other teams and not the New York Mets. At some point, there's going to be players that the Mets are going to be able to talk to, and may be able to talk to at a price that's less than what the market says they should get. And I understand that's frustrating. New York City is the biggest media market. It's the biggest drawing market in the entire country. And I understand that. Some fans are never going to get over the fact that the Mets are not going to be able to operate at the same level as the New York Yankees. But you know what? The Yankees are going out there doing what's best for the Yankees. Mets fans may not like it, but you know what? Good for the Yankees. If they go in and they have a certain price that they're looking to pay in regards to prospects for Garrett Cole, and they could get that from the Pirates, I can't blame the Yankees. If I want, I'll blame the Pirates. I'm still bitching about the Starlin Castro trade they made with the Cubs when they got him for nothing. That was a trade that the commissioner should have vetoed. It wasn't in the best interest of baseball. One team was willing to give a player away to another for nothing. That was disgusting. If I was commissioner, I would have vetoed it. It would have had nothing to do with what my interest is in regards to the team I root for. That was a trade that should not have been allowed to be made. As we hit the halfway point right here on the Pass Ball Show. Once again, this is John Pielli. We'll be with you until 7 o'clock. And then we're going to take a little time off Saturday, Sunday, Monday for Christmas. Hope everybody has a good holiday, enjoys their Christmas, time with their family. I'll reiterate the point that I've been making as we've been making it all week in regards to holidays. Being there for those that may not be as excited and happy about the holidays coming. Those that may see the holidays as a burden. Once again, I'm glad I've mentioned it 4 days this week. The latter part of December has the highest suicide rate in this country. People are at their wits' end. It's unbearable for some people. And those same people may have enjoyed their holidays year upon year upon year, but this year, for whatever reason, maybe they lost somebody close to them. Maybe they're just not coming to grips or just now coming to grips with everything they've had to deal with over the course of the past year. And when it comes time to throw that smile out there when they're amongst their family and their friends, they're dreading it. Open up a line of conversation. Ask somebody, how are you doing? And not in a rhetorical sense of, I'm fine, thank you. Really listen. Listen to what somebody is saying. And if they're going through a tough time, put an arm around them. Let them know that they have a friend, they have a loved one, they have a family member. Every suicide that you hear about over the course of the last couple weeks of December, blame should go to some that are around them. And sometimes suicide for somebody is just inevitable. And somebody has made that decision and there's nobody that could be close to them that could say the right words. And any effort that could have been made will all go for naught. But we could prevent some. Especially when it comes down to money. And I'm not saying take money that you don't have and give it to them. Give people, those that you love, those that are closest to you, give them the understanding that somebody is there, somebody's willing to listen to them, and somebody cares, and somebody loves them. Because that could be a prevailing factor when it comes to the choice that somebody may make to take their own life. Moving on. We haven't done Pielli's picks in a couple weeks. We sit here at a record of 16-15, getting ready to pick, and we're going to start with the two Saturday games. You got a 4:30 game and an 8:30 game. And I'm picking the two Saturday games just to throw some numbers out there. Because you know what? We didn't start the Pass Ball Show up again where we were doing daily shows until we were a considerable way through the NFL season. So as we sit here at 16-15, we're going to start by taking the Baltimore Ravens and the Indianapolis Colts. And I'm going to write these down as I go. I usually do them beforehand, but right now we're going to kind of do them on the fly. Ravens are 13-point favorites at home against the Indianapolis Colts. And I'm looking at this game, and I'm wondering if the line is a little bit too high. I like the fact that the Ravens are fighting for a playoff spot. The Ravens are sitting here at 8-6. They have a very good chance if they win out to be one of the wild card teams. The Colts are obviously waiting for the season to end, but not only waiting for the season to end because their record is 3-11, but you're also looking at the fact that they are probably going to go through some changes. They're probably going to move on from Coach Chuck Pagano. They're trying to figure out, did Jacoby Brissett show enough that they may consider moving Andrew Luck? And I know that hasn't been spoken about too much, but obviously if Andrew Luck was on the market, there would be a ton of teams that would be willing to give up draft choices and significant assets to take a chance that Andrew Luck could be their franchise quarterback. Do I think the Colts are going to give much of a fight? The answer is no. But I will tell you this. I don't think that the Ravens are going to beat them by 13. So in that regard, my first pick is the Indianapolis Colts plus 13 against the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to win, but I think the Colts will keep it close enough where the Baltimore Ravens won't cover. Game 2. You got the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are at home giving 9 points. Aaron Rodgers is on IR. His season's over. I still think it's pretty tough to go into Green Bay and play. The Minnesota Vikings are on their way, have a good chance to be the number 1 seed. The question is, are the Vikings going to play a little bit of Teddy Bridgewater? The only way I think Bridgewater gets in a game is if the game becomes a blowout. I'm going to go with my gut here. And I think initially I feel that the Vikings could cover 9 points. I have doubts about them doing it in Green Bay. So once again, similarly to the way I took the Colts because of the points, I'm going to do the same thing with the Packers. So I'm taking the Packers and 9 points against the Minnesota Vikings. That's game 2. Game 3, Christmas Eve. The Los Angeles Rams and the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are getting 6.5 at home. And I got to be honest. In spite of me being a Titans fan, I've been bothered by the play of the Titans over the last 4 to 6 weeks. They've had a situation that if they just simply won a couple winnable games, their path to the playoffs would be a lot easier. They got to win their next 2 games. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it, whether they're home or not. The spread's 6.5. I'm taking the Rams. Minus 6.5 at Tennessee. Game 3. Game 4. the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints. The Falcons need this game. And I'm going to tell you this. This is a scary matchup for the Atlanta Falcons because they need this game. There are enough teams that are competing for those wild card spots. And I think the Saints are in a very good position. They could pretty much wrap up their division. They could set themselves up to where maybe if they could get a little help, they could be in the mix for a first round bye. Obviously, they need a couple teams to lose. Mainly the Vikings, mainly the Eagles, mainly the Rams. It's possible, just not incredibly probable. So my next pick, game 4, second game on Sunday, New Orleans Saints -6 at home against the Falcons. And I said I was going to pick 6 games. So it's going to be 2 more. So the next game that I'm going to pick, and I'm going to do it right off the cuff here. In fact, I'm going to go with a game that I'm feeling right now, and I'm going to pick on some momentum. And I'm going to take the San Francisco 49er game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they're getting 4.5 at home. Now, if you told me 2 or 3 weeks ago would I think the 49ers could win this game, my answer would be no. They're building some momentum. This is a team that has very little to nothing to play for, but Jimmy Garoppolo is starting to prove himself as a legitimate NFL quarterback. The 49ers are not going to be taking a draft pick, a quarterback with their first pick next year. They got their quarterback of the future. They were impressive last week against Tennessee. Garoppolo has thrown for over 300 yards in consecutive weeks. And you know what? The Jacksonville Jaguars don't necessarily need this game. So to me, this is an easy pick. I'm taking the 49ers plus 4.5 at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So my final game that I'm going to pick this week in Pielli's picks is Seattle at Dallas. And I tell you, Seattle disappointed me last week. This is a team that certainly is going to need this game. A lot of people are jumping on the Cowboys bandwagon. Couple wins. Ezekiel Elliott's coming back. This is going to be the biggest tug of war that I've thought in regards to my picks this week. You got 2 teams that are sitting there at 8-6. And it's a very, very good opportunity for the Dallas Cowboys, playing at home with Elliott coming back. But I'm going to tell you this. The National Football League is ridiculously unpredictable. The Seahawks, you may start to question their passion, their fire, their desire to want to continue forward. Both of these teams need this game. And I think it's safe enough to say that the team that loses this week is probably out in regards to postseason possibility going into the last week. It's a game I'm going to be watching. It really is. Sunday, 4:25. I'm going to have the TV on. And I know millions of other people will as well. And I'm going against what consensus is going to tell me and conventional wisdom is going to tell me. The Cowboys at home with Ezekiel Elliott back. I think the Seahawks have something left to prove. And I think the Seahawks and Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson are putting some bulletin board material up when they're talking about how everybody's picking Dallas this week. How everybody is saying that the Seahawks can't win a game at home. I'm getting 5 points. I think the Seahawks are going to win this game outright. But if they don't, I still got 5 points. I feel strong enough about the Seahawks this week, and they are going to go into week number 17 with a chance to potentially win and have a chance to get to the postseason. And I think the Dallas Cowboys season will be considered over after week 16. Final pick, Seahawks +5 against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. So we'll go over Pielli's picks once again. We picked 6 games this week. I got the Colts +13 at Baltimore. Green Bay +9 at home against Minnesota on Saturday. And on Sunday, I got the Rams -6.5 at Tennessee. The Saints -6 at home against Atlanta. The 49ers +4.5 at home against the Jaguars. And then probably the biggest upset pick of the week is Seattle +5 at Dallas. Pielli's picks for week 16 as we sit here with a 16-15 record. Getting ready for games tomorrow. John Pielli Passball Show. Finishing it up here. Talked a little bit about Dick Enberg. May he rest in peace. If you had a chance, some good words there. Like I said, I promise I'm going to reach out to Mark Grant. We're going to see if we can get him on to talk a little Dick Enberg next week. Talked about Omar Minaya and the Mets. We should be able to have Mark Carrig on next week to talk a little bit about the Mets organization, what we can think about going forward, but most importantly, and I hate to preach this message when it comes to Mets fans, have a little patience. The offseason has not gotten started yet, and there is a lot of interest in wanting to wait things out in regards to a lot of other teams and a lot of big players. I still think that Jay Bruce and the Mets could be a match. If he signs within the next week, no. But if he signs in January, the Mets, I think, are going to have as good of a chance as anybody. Pielli's picks, we just went over them. And finally, this is going to be my last chance to bring this up and talk about this before Christmas, before the holidays. We'll be back with you 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 26th of December. Please, think about your inner circle. Think about your family. Have that extra conversation with somebody and ask them how they are doing. The suicide rate in this country is at its absolute high right now because of this time of year. And if you care about your loved ones, your family members, and those that are around you, reach out to them. Have that conversation. You never know when that little conversation that you have with somebody could be a turning point in somebody's life. Could be a turning point in their decision whether or not they want to go on with their own lives. Please, if one person that's listening or watching my show right now can save one person's life by having that extra conversation, then I did my job. If one person over the course of the 4 shows that I've been talking about this. Can have that one extra conversation with somebody that could save one life. I did my job. And I hope that could happen. And the other one, in regards to this, the same message, has to do with money. Don't feel like you got to spend money that you don't have just to appease somebody. You know, half the gifts that are given for Christmas and Hanukkah during the holiday season are rhetorical gifts that people aren't even going to enjoy or love anyway. How many times do you get a gift from a friend or a distant family member and you say, oh, thank you, and you thank them for giving you a gift, but you could really give a blessed shit about what it is that they gave you? It's about comfort. It's about seeing people. It's about being around those that you love. That's more important than any material thing. And most of the material things are not what that person cared about or really wanted anyway. So don't spend just for the sake of spending. There's time. And time is a lot more valuable. A voice is a lot more valuable than material things that cost money. And especially if you're going to put yourself into debt over that. You don't want to be a casualty next year because of unintelligent decisions you made around the holidays this year. Spending money just for the sake of spending money that you don't necessarily have, and doing it just because you feel like you have to. John Q. Public in a society tells you that you should, so do it. Come on. Think a little smarter. Please. If you have money, spend. But if you don't have money, the presence of yourself, being around family, being around loved ones, sharing memories, making memories, it's a lot more important than any material thing. So please, take a moment to spend time with those that are close to you and make sure they know how you feel about them. And don't spend money just for the sake of spending money on rhetorical gifts. Anybody that wants to give me a rhetorical gift, I'd rather just see you. That's been my message all week. And like I said, I just hope that somebody listens. May everybody please enjoy your holidays. Merry Christmas. We'll be back with you the 26th on Tuesday. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.